The Mystery of Golgotha, referring to the passion, crucifixion, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, contained within it all of the elements of the secret rites of initiation of the mystery schools of antiquity. Within the suffering, crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Christ, we can see a macrocosmic version of initiation, which was the culmination and fulfillment of all the microcosmic enactments of aspiring students of the mysteries which preceded it from antiquity forward. The mystery of Golgotha, and this is the place where Christ was crucified, if you recall, fulfilled all of the goals of the mysteries of antiquity and infinitely more. Through Christ's deed, what used to be a guarded, secretive rite of initiation, reserved for a very select group of individuals, became a possibility for anyone. Now, please consider Paul's conversion on the road to Damascus, in which he was struck to the ground by a blinding light, as the archetypal experience of meeting Christ in the etheric. Now, this event itself deserves to be studied at length. However, suffice it to say that for this video offering, that this was Paul's experience, this experience of Paul's on the road to Damascus was a form of initiation that took place in life, a conversion, which is the model for all of us at this current stage in the world event. A form of initiation that takes place in life as a model of modern initiation, and contain within it the elements of suffering, crucifixion, death, and resurrection, by which occurs what we might call Christian initiation. But a initiation, I can honestly say that my own conversion to a more focused, aware, committed, conscious, spiritual life began on August 11th, 2021, and definitively the initiation for me was September 24th, 2021, with my Kundalini awakening and all that that entails. A conversion, for sure, a light, a blinding light that was my initiation, so to speak. Modern life offers ample opportunity for such encounters for all of us, especially as the climate of world events becomes more psychotic, more dysfunctional, fractured, more ego-based. So this time in which humanity finds itself, you will have, the collective will have a highly significant encounter with evil in the world. You will encounter evil in your own way in the world as part of your initiation. And one of the goals or tasks of our current age, which is the fifth post-Atlantean epoch or age, is to bring about an encounter with evil in order to unveil the so-called mystery of evil. The mystery of evil is directly connected with what initiates call the meeting with the lesser guardian of the threshold. The lesser guardian appears before every soul who strives sufficiently to enter into the spiritual world. So the unveiling of the mystery of evil is something that initiates are familiar with, since initiation requires such an unveiling and the meeting with the lesser guardian. If humanity will not cross the threshold consciously by seeking initiation, it will inevitably confront evil unconsciously in outer life. Since humanity in general is not on a conscious spiritual path, a global confrontation with evil is inevitable. This confrontation is meant to bring about a shift in consciousness, to wake up the masses. Nevertheless, in individual cases, it is not a guarantee of progress. Only those who are sufficiently prepared and willing will make advances in this encounter with the mystery of evil, as the evil being, as Ahriman, Satan, Lucifer prepares to incarnate in our time, has incarnated in our time. It will be helpful to remind ourselves that he is that power, that this Satan, this Lucifer, Ahriman, is that power which always intends evil, but always produces the good. Such a perspective as will lift us above the difficulties of coming world events allows us to see the purpose in all things. Yes, even the dark ones, those dark elements in our life, the dark night of the soul, there is a purpose in that we go through our own rites of initiation. There is a purpose in all things, even in evil. The purpose of the incarnation of evil is to facilitate a meeting with the lesser guardian of the threshold for a greater portion of humanity than might otherwise be possible, bringing about a greater good as a result. And the good of which I'm speaking is a stimulus to what amounts to meeting Christ in the etheric, in the light, or the second coming, basically. And that second coming of Christ is within each of us. It's not in the clouds. This is the second coming within each of all of us, our conversion on the road to Damascus, as it were, in order to set squarely before us the possibility of progress through meeting the lesser guardian of the threshold in full consciousness. I offer the following explanation and description of an encounter with this being. In the normal course of spiritual development, we often have numerous semi-conscious encounters with the lesser guardian until we can finally meet him in full consciousness in the right way. Now, using the terminology of the mysteries of ancient Egypt to illuminate and clarify these experiences so that we can meet the guardian in full consciousness and thereby enter into a more fruitful relationship to the spiritual world. So let us envision a student of the death mysteries in ancient Egypt. And keep in mind, Jesus the Christ was a graduate of the Egyptian mystery schools, as well as spent time traveling in India. His name, Yesu, appears in the records of the monasteries of India and Tibet. But here we're talking about something similar that Christ went through in his studies in the mystery schools in ancient Egypt. So let us envision a student of the death mysteries in ancient Egypt being selected from among the masses of ordinary people by initiates themselves, or by those recognized by initiates to be sufficiently schooled in mystery knowledge to recognize a potential aspirant to the mystery. Now, years of schooling, which included the passing of trials, often dangerous trials, were required to become a candidate for initiation. The primary goal of the trials leading up to initiation was to produce catharsis, or what we might call purification of the astral body, cleansing of inappropriate desires, instincts, and passions. The candidate for initiation needed to become familiar with his or her lower nature and learn to subjugate it to his or her higher reasoning capacities. Without the rigorous training designed for this purpose, the student would not be adequately prepared for meeting the Egyptian guardian of the threshold, Anubis. The culminating event on the path of the initiate, which corresponds to the crucifixion and death of Christ, was a death ritual in which the spiritual aspirant was conducted into the spiritual world by means of a controlled near-death experience which lasted for 3 days. Now, during this journey in the spiritual world, wisdom and knowledge that could not be attained by normal earthly means might be gained. And through this experience, the initiated individual was able to observe spiritual events and beings, which would subsequently provide a completely new framework for his or her future life and task on earth. And after the 3.5 days of death-like sleep, the initiate was awakened, corresponding to the resurrection, and brought back into his or her everyday consciousness. Having successfully completed this so-called temple sleep initiation, conferred upon the initiate the title son or daughter of Osiris, or son or daughter of God. It is important to understand that this particular initiation is no longer valid or necessary in our current era, since the infusion of the Christ being into the earth and its etheric body at the time of the Mystery of Golgotha, that's important to consider, because as Christ's death was very important, very transformational, and we must consider that, meaning that, how to explain this? Essentially, when Christ died, Christ became the spirit of the earth. When his blood was spilled on the hill of Golgotha, where he was crucified, Christ became the spirit of the earth by pouring himself into the earth's etheric body. And that is why his death, Christ's death, his mission being fulfilled, was so monumental. Not in the way that, yes, Christ died for our sins, but the way that it's been represented in organized religion, it is not meant to impart guilt or be crucified under control of organized religion. So this is a deeper mystery, but Christ and the fulfillment of Jesus Christ's mission changed everything drastically for all of humans. So that is important to keep in mind. And that's a slippery slope for me to kind of talk about, because I don't really wish to empower anybody in an organized religion that uses the name Jesus to gaslight people, to make people feel guilty, to gain power over others, which has been used for. The second coming of Christ is achievable within all of us. And to hell with the preacher man. So this son or daughter of God, so understand that all of that is no longer valid or necessary, because the infusion of the Christ being into the earth and its etheric body at the time of the Mystery of Golgotha has become possible to have a comparable initiation experience in a multitude of ways in the course of one's normal life, as was the case with Paul on the road to Damascus. So today, the school of the mysteries is played out in daily life, and the joys and challenges and what we might call the agony and the ecstasy of life. In studying the beliefs and practices of Egyptian culture, we find in the Egyptian Book of the Dead or other inscriptions, depictions archaeologists have unearthed, we discover just how profound is the wisdom upon which that culture was founded. We find majestic spiritual beings and sublime wisdom evident in the religious science to which Egyptian arts were almost exclusively devoted. Of the many gods of the Egyptian pantheon, we will discuss just a few, the first of which is the jackal god called Anubis. And we will be focusing on Anubis and his role as guardian of the mysteries. And modern scholars describe Anubis as being the guide in the process of embalming and protector of the soul after death. He is also recognized as being the guardian of the scales, who was responsible to weigh the soul or the heart against Maat, the goddess of truth and of divine wisdom, who is often depicted with or represented as an Ostrich Feather. Maat was the wife of Anubis. Anubis was in later Egyptian mythology identified with Thoth, the Jehuti, Thoth, whom the Greeks called Hermes, and the Romans later called Mercury. Another one of the names adopted by this divinity, particularly in Rome, was Hermanubis, a synthesis of Hermes and Anubis. The jackal represents quite aptly, as we will see, an experience that one confronts at the onset of the initiation process. It corresponds to what Rudolf Steiner describes as the meeting with the lesser guardian of the threshold. And that's a term that's found in Rudolf Steiner's book, How to Know Higher Worlds. But Egyptologists conflate the great initiate Hermes with the god Anubis because they don't have the benefit of the spiritual research of the likes of Rudolf Steiner, who was able to confirm the existence of human beings who, because they were great initiates, came to be depicted as gods. If we understand the mysteries, we will not be surprised by such designations, which are closer to the truth than suspected. Initiates were a special class of people who, because of their advanced spiritual status, were rightly regarded as being unlike ordinary human beings. Thoth, Jehuti, Hermes, stature in the eyes of the Egyptians as a great initiate who journeyed in the spiritual world of the dead, qualified him as an immortal or a god. Judging by the name Hermanubis, who can surmise that Hermes, the great initiate, who was largely responsible for the great culture of Egypt, which lasted almost 3,000 years, wore the headdress of Anubis the Jackal in the initiation rite that we are focusing on. He probably originated the idea. What Egyptologists have not understood is that when we speak of the god Anubis, we are speaking of a certain role that Hermes played in the initiation ceremonies as the guardian and guide of the dead soul or of the candidate for initiation. In Egyptian ritual initiation in general, not only Hermes, but any officiating priest, called Hierophant in the Eleusinian Mysteries, typically wore the headdress of Anubis the Jackal. The jackal head was black in color, signifying its connection with death and fertility. Jackals are not black-headed or black. Perhaps it is possible that a variety of black jackal existed 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. In any event, to the Egyptian, black was a color rich in meaning. The original name for Egypt was Kemet, meaning black land. The lifeblood of Egypt, the Nile River, had a large floodplain that created fertile black lands, from which it is believed that the name Kemet derives. Today, Christ and Archangel Michael are our principal guides from the spiritual world on the journey across the threshold. Since the time of the Mystery of Golgotha, Michael has been understood to hold the scales that are used to weigh the souls of the dead, or those who seek to cross the threshold during life. As evidence of this, many depictions of Archangel Michael holding the scales appeared in religious art during the last 2,000 years. In the place of the initiate Thoth, Hermes, are the individualities of Lazarus, John, and John the Baptist, who represent the streams of Cain and Abel, or Seth. And these modern initiates spiritually guide the soul through the upper and lower worlds, the upper leading to the central sun, and the lower to the golden land of Shambhala in the center of the earth. Now, coming back to the Egyptian jackal god Anubis, let us examine briefly the role of the jackal in Egyptian life. A jackal is a dog-like animal that is carnivorous and a scavenger. Scavengers were valued for their role in cleansing the environments in which human beings live, an important theme that we will return to later. For now, we will review a few of the various functions we can discern in depictions of Anubis. He is often pictured holding both a flail and a shepherd's crook. Anubis Hermes is considered to be the soul of the initiate who crosses the threshold. The image of the shepherd's crook may be interpreted as a symbol of both a prod to move the soul ahead and as a crook to pull the soul back. In essence, as the shepherd of souls, he has the power and authority to control the soul's progress. The flail is an agricultural device designed for threshing grains that is used to loosen and dispose of the husk. It is often made of two pieces of wood attached together with a hinge, one piece being used for a handle and the other to beat the grain. Some flails have multiple beaters attached to a single handle, like the one often depicted with Anubis. The question is, why would the jackal-headed god of the death initiation be holding a flail along with the shepherd's crook? The flail can be understood in terms of Anubis's function in relationship to the souls he is entrusted with. In his other role, he is the one who weighs the heart of the deceased, or the initiate in this case, in a balance against the ostrich feather representing Mot, the goddess of justice and order. Truth. If the soul weighed heavier than the feather, it was given to be devoured by the demon Amet, the bone eater, for judgment, and was said to experience a second death. Similarly, a good soul whose heart balanced with the feather of Mot might be considered food, grain for the good god. So getting back to the flail, we begin to see the picture of the flail as the tool for removing the chaff from the wheat of the soul, or in this case, of the person being initiated. If we examine the symbolism further within its context, we will see that it gets more specific and more meaningful. We can easily understand that a flail applied to a person might symbolize the removing of the chaff of human vice to yield the grain of food for the gods. But let us take a closer look at the whole image of Anubis holding this implement. We must understand that a jackal is a flesh-eating animal whose function in respect to a human soul, as we will see, is quite like that of the flail in respect to grains. He is not only a flesh-eating animal, but he is a scavenger whose job is to clean up after a death. So, we might say that Anubis is meant to attack the flesh of the initiate. By this we can understand the derivation of the word used in the New Testament to characterize the sinful nature, the flesh. Surely when St. Paul speaks of the flesh, he is not referring to literal flesh, but is using a technical term that may very well have had its origination in the Egyptian mysteries in which Moses was schooled. The initiates who kept the mysteries were well aware of the fact that human flesh, or more precisely the embodied state, was susceptible to corruption, to earthly appetites, and was a major obstacle to safely entering into the spiritual world. They knew that the soul that dwells in the body as its temple must be cleansed of the passions and instincts of the flesh. This was the reason for the demanding preparatory work of the initiates, to cleanse the astral body of impure desires. Now, in a rather abstract way, we have examined the symbolic meaning of the function of Anubis, the jackal god, the guide of souls in the underworld. Having wrested meanings from the images of the crook, the flail, and the jackal, let us proceed a step further, beyond conceptions and images, to what inspirations and intuitions we might find in the beings these images represent. This in turn will lead us to a further understanding of Anubis, the jackal, the flail, the scales, the weighing of the heart, and finally the goddess Mot and her feather, which all have tremendous significance for us as initiates. Let us imagine the soul of the aspiring initiate, gazing as it were into the gate of the moon sphere, where a most radiant image before him or her stands. Here, at the beginning of the path of the journey that leads into soul and spirit lands, he or she will inevitably meet the guardian of the threshold. Let us say that Anubis is that guardian. He or she may or may not see a visible image of the guardian, but he or she will hear the voice of the guardian. What will that voice sound like? What will be the tone of that voice? What will it speak? The voice will be like a ravenous jackal, hungry for the flesh of our soul. It will speak to us out of the elemental power we have given to it in the past, for it consists of the negative karma that we have incurred. Every deed that damaged another being, every word that wounded another being, every thought that burned within us with infernal fire is its power and informs the tone with which it speaks. It will not be a human-sounding voice, although it will speak with human language. How might a jackal speak? It would speak with a craving that is elemental, pure, and instinctive, like the subhuman being that it is. What will it say? It will accuse us. It will remind us of our corrupt nature, of our mistakes, of the things we have done to hurt others, of the impure way we look at the world, of our lack of understanding, of our lack of vision, of our lack of wisdom. It will hold up before us all the reasons that we should not proceed to our goal. It will do everything in its power to obscure the radiant vision that stands at the gate before us. It will try to ravage us with doubts and fears. It will tear into our flesh without a shred of mercy. Its voice is the voice of ruthlessness, the voice of no pity. It will call us names. Perhaps it will call us worthless, stupid, ignorant, or superficial. Perhaps it will call us a heap of dung. And every word will be absolutely true, hitting the mark, as it were, of what we are in our lower nature, because it is the voice of our lower nature. This is the voice of the lesser guardian of the threshold, Anubis the Jackal, who is a scavenger, whose function is to clean up after a kill. In the death mysteries, the aim of Anubis is to reduce the aspiring initiate to his or her core being, to eat away all of the flesh, so that only spirit remains. If we have been prepared for this meeting by our own ruthless self-examination, we will not crumble before such sayings as we will hear. If we are ready to take responsibility for all of the true accusations of Anubis, then we will be properly humiliated. Our flesh will be exposed. We will be naked and silent, realizing that we have no defense. We are guilty. If we have the wherewithal to reflect and see the enormity of the truth of the accusations, and if our desire for higher truth and for the higher life of spirit truly lives within us, even in the minutest measure in the depths of our being, we then have an opportunity to speak up for ourselves out of those silent depths. And we must have the right words, words that cannot be rehearsed. They must rise up, as faint and frail as they might be before the guardian's imperiousness. We must be willing to confess that his words are true, all true. And then we must commit what little strength and faith we have in such a moment, a faith perhaps no bigger than a mustard seed. We must consign ourselves to the utilization of all of our little powers with the help of the spiritual world, to take the path of transforming our weaknesses, to make good our mistakes, to challenge our fears, to right our wrongs, to learn to see, hear, and obey the impulses of the Spirit. Only then can we enter the gate, the moon gate, and experience the fullness of the divine wisdom of Sophia, whose power and glory is spread out over the cosmos, waiting to unite with us. Only then can she appear to us, as St. John saw her, with a crown of 12 stars on her head, the zodiac, or the fixed stars, clothed with the sun sphere, and the moon beneath her feet, the moon sphere. Only then can we visit the spirit land, where all things radiate a moral quality and where everything breathes the life of the Godhead. Only then can we meet Christ in the etheric and full consciousness. Now, let us examine the symbolism contained in the pictures that we see commonly of Anubis, the guardian of the scales, in relation to what we have uncovered thus far. As mentioned, it is also the responsibility of Anubis to weigh the soul of the dead or of the initiate, represented by the heart in Duat, the underworld, against the feather of Mot. What is the significance of this? Firstly, Mot is the consort or wife of Anubis. She is the goddess of order, balance, justice, truth. Mot can be viewed as an expression of the divine wisdom that lives in nature and the cosmos. That she wears or carries an ostrich feather, and that the ostrich feather is used to weigh the human heart, is highly significant. An ostrich is a bird that is earthbound. It cannot fly. The ostrich is a picture of the human being in the sense that human beings were once spirit beings before they were clothed in flesh. In early Lemurian times, before the so-called fall of humankind, before humans incarnated in dense physical bodies, we were like birds that could fly, that could move in not quite liquid and not quite airy spiritual currents. When human beings incarnated, we became like ostriches. We still had feathers, so to speak, the remnants of our heavenly natures, but we were bound to the earth, no longer able to fly as beings of light in the spirit land of Adam Kadmon. The ostrich feather is the symbol of what remains of our spiritual nature after the fall. We might call it the spark of the divine in us, or the still small voice that Elijah heard on Mount Horeb, or perhaps we might call it the mustard seed of faith remaining in us, spoken of by Jesus in the Synoptic Gospels. In each case, we are speaking of something tiny. The feather is a very small remnant, an almost insignificant representation of our divine nature. Who could ever fly with one feather? But the feather is what is redeemable in our nature. It is of the same coinage as the gods. Spiritual as the Godhead is spiritual. It is pure soul substance. That Mot was understood as the goddess of the ostrich feather is evidence of the recognition among the initiates of ancient Egypt that the Divine Mother, the divine wisdom, the holy soul still resides innate and feather-like in our deepest being, in the underworld of our nature. When all the husks or sheath of our human nature are stripped away, are disposed of by the flail, are torn away by the teeth of Anubis, there remains, connected to the mother in the depths of the earth of our beings, the holy, divine human essence given birth to the divine child. The great mystery is open to all and remains eternally unfathomable. The new world is born of grief, and ash is dissolved in tears as a drought of eternal life. In everyone there dwells the Heavenly Mother, bearing each child in eternity. This is not a figurative event, but an actual birth, the second coming of this divine child of Christ. It is a birth by the Virgin Sophia in us. And besides this, it is a dim recognition of the Mother Lodge, the golden land of Shambhala in the depths of the earth. Once we connect with this essence and raise it up to confront the guardian of the threshold, we become conscious of the life within us that is incorruptible and untouchable by Anubis. In fact, as we speak out of the silent knowledge of the innate divinity within us, it is the Word who speaks in us, the Christ child. In that moment, the Christ child is born in us. And that is the second coming. We can only truly meet our adversary at the threshold in his name, the name of the I Am within us. In our time, since the mystery of Golgotha, Christ meets us the moment we connect with the spark of the divine in us. He is present in our I Am to assist us. He is there to make it possible for us to overcome death, to help us recognize that it is not I, but Christ in me that can meet the challenges that are too difficult for us alone. He is our higher I being. He is Christ in us, as us. For we are one in Him, and together we constitute His body. Once the Word is born in us, we are then able to cross the threshold to connect with the moon, the sun sphere, and the sphere of the fixed stars, and the zodiac. For these are all part of the heavenly Sophia, who stands as queen in this her domain. Seeing the vision of this glorious woman who is spoken of in the Revelation of St. John in chapter 12 has monumental implications for our ability to perceive the spiritual world. Contact with the three spheres referred to opens the possibility for higher perception in the astral, etheric, and the devaconic worlds. Christ made this possible through the mystery of Golgotha. The sacrifice of his divine nature, born in grief and ash, for earthly humanity has brought potent fire to the smoldering, dull glow of the divine in us. One last consequence of the event of our meeting with Anubis that we should address here is the objectification of our lower nature. Before spirit birth, we cannot successfully remove ourselves from our lower nature. We cannot stand back and see this part of ourselves as distinct from ourselves. As a result of our meeting with the guardian of the threshold, we are given the ability to watch the movements of our lower nature, to observe and to control those movements, which are our lower motivation. If we stay true to our commitment to the higher life, we will not be surprised when we see evil weaving in ourselves and in others. Anubis has made us aware of this. And we will not condemn it, since we ourselves have risen above such condemnation by virtue of the loving presence of the Virgin Sophia and Christ the Word, both of whom condemn us not. We will see that Anubis has done us a favor by exposing our base desires and motives, and we will be able to welcome such knowledge of ourselves and of others without judgment. If we strive in this manner as we ought, we will be able to fulfill the dictum of the great American writer of the 19th century, Nathaniel Hawthorne, who brought a powerful moral imaginations to bear on the elitist Victorian religious and social values of his time, in which religious self-righteousness often obscured both the baseness of human nature and the mercy of divine love. In a short work called Fancy's Showbox from Twice Told Tales, his narrator says, "Man must not disclaim his brotherhood, even with the guiltiest. His words break forth like a stroke of Archangel Michael lightning through the heavy clouds of Victorian superficiality. Our time is hardly less elitist in the Victorian era. Only today we clothe our condemnations in 21st century garb, so to speak. The sort of self-awareness Hawthorne is referring to is what we will need during the soon coming time when humanity must, as a whole, confront the guardian of the threshold on the plane of the material world. By it, we will be armed with the necessary objectivity to know what is happening. So we have seen something of the wisdom that was revealed to the initiates of ancient Egypt, that is hidden in the symbols left by their holy scribes and artisans. We have had a glimpse of the journey of the soul of the initiate standing at the moon gate before the guardian of the threshold, and how it can apply to us. Today, we stand at the threshold of Christ in the etheric sphere of the earth, ready to experience him in his second coming. May these words live on in our hearts and be the means by which we may more perfectly meet the guardian, empowered by Christ and Sophia to speak the word that will cause him to allow us access to the mysteries in which we discover that the power that would always do evil can only produce good.
Namaste, namaskaram.